I'm Holly. We're here at Hope's Edge Farm in Hope, Maine. It's a 101-acre farm. I mean, one of the reasons that we got LMF funding, I'm sure, was because of the development pressure in this particular area. And there's been substantial development all around us. It was headed towards being developed when we purchased the property. When it was sold by the original farmer, there were 120 acres that came with it. And the new owner promptly peeled off 20 acres and sold 20 acres.
When LMF funds a conservation easement, there's a lot of back and forth between the land trust and the landowner and LMF, generally throughout the process, but especially when you're talking about the terms of the easement, and for working land especially, like making the land work for the farmers and the landowner that live there is an important piece of the puzzle. It's keeping land in agriculture or in forestry. So like the LMF projects across the entire state and in the mid-coast, they're like these gems. They're like community gems, and they represent this kind of like slew of important projects to the landowners certainly, but also like across the local communities that benefit from them being protected.